back everybody, Unit 7, The Empty Classroom. Today we're going to do reading 2. So if you can open your textbook at page 198. Okay. Reading 2, The Fun They Had. Okay, look at the bold-faced words in the reading and think about the questions. 1. Which words do you know the meaning of? And 2, can you use any of the words in a sentence? This story was written by Isaac Asimov in 1951. It addresses the question of distance learning using a computer. At that time, the idea of this type of learning was science fiction, and having a home computer was unimaginable. Most people did not even own a television set at the time. Can you imagine? Poof, mind-blowing. Okay, let's look at the words. So we've got here scanning through. What words can we come up with? First page, we don't really have any. Go to the second page. This is quite a long text, yeah? Sector overall disappointed. One more page. Dispute, adjusted. Yeah, those are the words that we're looking at. Very good. Okay, so the first thing I'd like you to do is to preview. Please look at the title and the headings and the visuals, and from there predict what type of text this is and the purpose. Go ahead, do that first. Awesome, write it down and then answer the questions number 1 and 2. Which words do you know the meaning of and which ones can you use in a sentence? Maybe you can answer those 2 right now. Awesome. Okay, then we go to the point which is skimming. So you're going to read the first paragraph and the last, since this looks like a story, right? And the last paragraph. Tell me what the main ideas of this text. Write it down. Great. Okay. Read the story, The Fun They Had, and as you read, notice the bold-faced vocabulary. Try to figure out what they mean in the context of the story of the text. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to turn on the audio. Let's go.
The Fun They Had by Isaac Asimov, from Earth is Room Enough. Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary. On the page headed May 17th, 2157, she wrote, "Today, Tommy found a real book." It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him that there was a time when all stories were printed on paper. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way that they were supposed to. On a screen, you know. And then, when they had turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it that it had had when they read it the first time. "Gee," said Tommy, "what a waste. When you're through with the book, you just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had 1,000,000 books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away." "Same with mine," said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many books as Tommy had. He was 13. She said, "Where did you find it?" "In my house." He pointed without looking because he was busy reading. "In the attic." "What's it about?" "School." Margie was scornful. "School? What's there to write about school? I hate school." Margie had always hated school, but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. He was a round little man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at Margie and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again, but he knew how all right, and after an hour or so, there it was again, large and square and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. That wasn't so bad. The part Margie hated most was the slot where she had to put homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code they made her learn when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the mark in no time. The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted Margie's head. He said to her mother, "It's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Those things happen sometimes. I've slowed it up to a 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory." And he patted Margie's head again. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out completely. So she said to Tommy, "Why would anyone write about school?" Tommy looked at her with very superior eyes. "Because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago." He added loftily, pronouncing the word very carefully, "centuries ago." Margie was hurt. "Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago." She read the book over his shoulder for a while, then said, "Anyway, they had a teacher." "Sure, they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man." "A man? How could a man be a teacher?" "Well, he just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions." "A man isn't smart enough." "Sure he is. My father knows as much as my teacher." "He can't. A man can't know as much as a teacher." "He knows almost as much, I betcha." Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, "I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me." Tommy screamed with laughter. "You don't know much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building, and all the kids went there." "And all the kids learned the same thing?" "Sure, if they were the same age." "But my mother says a teacher has to be adjusted to fit the mind of each boy and girl it teaches, and that each kid has to be taught differently." "Just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book." "I didn't say I didn't like it," Margie said quickly. She wanted to read about those funny schools. They weren't even half finished when Margie's mother called, "Margie, school!" Margie looked up. "Not yet, Mama." "Now," said Mrs. Jones, "and it's probably time for Tommy, too." Margie said to Tommy, "Can I read the book some more with you after school?" "Maybe," he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the dusty old book tucked beneath his arm. Margie went into the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom, and the mechanical teacher was on and waiting for her. It was always on at the same time every day, except Saturday and Sunday, because her mother said little girls learned better if they learned at regular hours. The screen was lit up, and it said, "Today's arithmetic lesson is on the addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot." Margie did so with a sigh. She was thinking about the old schools they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. All the kids from the whole neighborhood came, laughing and shouting in the schoolyard, sitting together in the schoolroom, going home together at the end of the day. They learned the same things so they could help one another on the homework and talk about it. And the teachers were people. The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen, When we add the fractions 1/2 and 1/4, Margie was thinking about how the kids must have loved it in the old days. She was thinking of the fun they had. He knows almost as much, I betcha. Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, I wouldn't want to
Okay, great. That's the end of the story. That leads us to the comprehension. Okay, so you're going to try to answer the questions, and I'd like you to go over the text, to scan the text, yeah, to find the answers to these questions. So before you do that, it's important that you annotate the questions on the keywords so you can scan through the text. You can pause your video. Go ahead. Great. Then we can discuss those answers together when we meet each other in class. So good. Okay, that brings us to the reading skill. Recognizing the speaker in direct speech. Now, in reading 2, paragraph 13, the author writes, the inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted Margie's head. He said to her mother, it's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Who is speaking in the quoted section of the excerpt? Underlined. And how do you know? Okay, in a story, the direct speech is mostly the dialogue, right? For which we use the quotation marks. And the rest of it, we mostly call that's the narrating part, the narration. Authors often include direct speech, quoted dialogue in their writing. This can be confusing for readers, especially if more than 2 people are talking. As a reader, you can use clues such as pronoun reference or the back and forth order of conversations to understand exactly who is speaking. You can also use background knowledge of a character's opinions or ideas. If you misinterpret who's speaking, it can be hard to understand the story. Read the paragraphs from the fun they had and complete the exercise. So we've got number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Identify the person who is speaking in each paragraph and explain how you know. How do you know who is speaking? Okay, I'd like you to look at this and write it down so we can discuss that when we meet each other in school. Awesome. That brings us to activity 2. When you're going back to reading 2, reread paragraphs 15 until 42. Work with a partner or first by yourself, and then we can discuss together. Try to underline or highlight what each speaker says. So we're talking about Margie, Tommy, Margie's mother, and a mechanical teacher. Write the speaker's name in the margin or use a different color highlight for each speaker. So I'd like you to do that. So when we meet, we can discuss this together, okay? So underline or highlight what each speaker says and put the name in the margin. You can pause your video. Go ahead. Great. That brings us to connecting the readings. First step is organizing. We're looking at reading 1 and reading 2. Describe different models of education. That's what it's about. I'd like you to complete the chart comparing the readings. So we have numbers 1 until 7 here in the left column, and in teaching to the world, that's reading 1, and the fun they had is reading 2. I'd like you to look at the information, the facts from both reading sections, and complete the chart. You can pause your video now. Yeah, that brings us to step 2, which is synthesizing. Now we're going to use that information in the chart. Choose one of the scenarios for number 1. Write a response from Margie. For number 2, write a response from Professor Dunayer. Use the information from step 1 and write on a separate piece of paper. So basically what you're doing in number 1, from an MOOC student to Margie, it says here, you're really lucky that you learn via technology. Before I took the MOOC course, I had always wanted to have the flexibility that an online course allows. I also enjoy the international perspective offered by my cyber classmates now. I am so happy, you must be too. Number 2, From Tommy to Professor Denayer. Margie and I hate learning at home without other students. We don't understand why students would choose to take online courses. Wouldn't they have more fun and friends in school? Also, wouldn't they learn more? Okay, very good. So I repeat, the whole point of this is that you use either one scenario and you write a response. Now, you can write your ideas down. Which one do you agree with number 1 and 2, and why would you agree with that? Maybe you can write a response from Margie, a response from Professor Denayer, and maybe you can write down which one you think is the best one or the better one, and reasons why you have that opinion. Awesome, that's so good. That brings us to the end of our video today. What is it that we did today? We started off with the vocabulary, the bold-faced words in the text, trying to understand what the words and phrases mean by looking at the context of the text. We then did comprehension by scanning through the text and finding the answers to the questions. The reading skill, recognizing the speaker in direct speech. The direct speech is the dialogue within a story. The other part we call the narration. We talked about previewing the text to find the text genre and purpose, then skimming the text to get the main idea, and scanning the text for answers. And in the end, we connected reading 1 with reading 2, completing a chart, and then responding to 2 different situations, responses, and having an opinion and giving reasons for that opinion. Very good. You're amazing. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Bye.